Okay, so I wanted to show you how to do a t-test using Excel and using some of the functions of Excel. I have it on a PC, on my laptop. The functionality on the laptop is much more than on the iPad, but you can still do all these things, and I'll try and do them similar to how you would do them in the iPad. Okay, so I have here set up my data already. I have my 10 subjects. Now we use names in labs, so this could be anything. This is just to identify our different measures, right? And then we have our 2 data points. And as you can see, these 2 data points were taken on the same individual. So this is a paired t-test. We're looking at whether some effect of some variable that we changed in between the 2 measures. Okay, and I'm not specifying on this, I just pulled together some random stuff. But in lab it was whether or not you had your face dunked in water and your data point was actually beats per minute, right? Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to calculate is the difference. And you can, get out your calculator and find these individually, or you can let Excel do it for you. The way you do that is press equals, and now it's ready for a function. But what I'm actually going to do is reference this cell, and what we're looking for is the difference between data point 1 and data point 2. So I'm going to say data point 2 minus data point 1, but rather than type them in, I'm going to actually click on the actual cells. Once I have them both in there, then I can hit enter and it gives me the data point and it calculates that for me. Now what you can do is you can copy. I'm going to hit Control C, but it would be Command C on your iPad, and then highlight all these empty ones and hit paste. Okay, and what it did is it automatically assumed that because I'm pasting it here, I want the same formula but relative to the position that it's at. So it did C3 minus C2, or sorry, B3. And it did that for all of them. So it automatically just filled in that data. What's great about this is if I go back and I found that, oh, this was actually supposed to be 65, when I correct that, it'll automatically correct this because it's referencing that data point. Okay, so the first step that we have to do is we have to find the difference. Okay, another thing we can do then as well is I just want to keep track of the averages of each of these. So I'm going to do equals at the bottom here. I'm going to have the average at the bottom. So equals average. Okay, and you can see that function pops up right there. I can double click that, and then I'm going to select what I want it to average. So that first data point. When I hit enter, there it is. Now I can do the same thing. I can copy and paste this into this cell, and now I'll take an average of that data point. Same here. Now I have the average difference. Okay, and I'm going to need that for this next calculation. So this I'm looking for the difference minus the average difference, and I just calculated that down here at 17.6. Now this one is actually a little bit different. So I'm going to hit equal. I want to find the difference, which is this column, and now I want to subtract the average difference. Now if I click on here, it will calculate it for me for this cell, but what I'm actually going to do is instead is put in the actual number. Okay, because what that allows me to do is, again, Control C or Command C and Control V, and now I have all the differences automatically calculated. But if I would have instead put in the cell, if I clicked on the cell number and hit enter, then all of these would not work, because what it's actually doing is it's actually trying to reference the next one down relative to that first one. So I have to do the actual number here. So I'll go ahead and fix those. All right. Now the next step then is I want to square that number. So I'm taking the difference minus the average difference squared. So I do equals this, and there's a number of ways you can do that. You can just hit the star button and click it again, or you can use this shift 6, which is the hat. Okay, or you can use the function and find the squared function as well. I'm just going to do it like that, and so now I'm getting the square of the differences, and that has now fully populated those numbers and calculations for me. Okay, so now what we're going to do, these are the steps from your lab. We're going to try and figure out what the t function is. Okay, so to do that, first we need to know n. N is the number of subjects, number of participants, number of samples. We have 10 samples. Degrees of freedom equals n minus 1, so that's 10 minus 1. And now we want to calculate then the variance, which is s squared. So I have it written a little bit different here, but that's what this is, s squared, which is the sum of the differences squared divided by the degrees of freedom. So to calculate the variance, we're going to take this little e, funny looking Greek e here, means sum. So we're going to take the sum of the difference minus the average difference squared. So really we want the sum of this column here. So I'm going to write sum in here. I'm going to put equals sum, and now I can use that function to select all of these, and that gives me the sum of all those there. So now I have that, and I need to divide by the degrees of freedom. So I can do equals here, select that, and then divide by my degrees of freedom. All right, and now I have the variance. That's what the variance equals. To get the standard deviation, I just need the square root of that. So I can do equal. There's actually is a square root function. So I'm typing in SQ, and then that pops up. I double click here. I click on this, hit enter. Now I have the standard deviation. Okay, the next step is the standard error. I know you can't see this very well, but it's the standard deviation divided by the square root of n. So I can go equals this divided by n is 10, but I want the square root of that. So I can actually use this hat again. The square root is the same thing as saying to the 0.5 power, to the half power. So then I hit enter. That gives me the standard error. And then finally I can get the t statistic, or the t value, by looking at the average difference, which we calculated up here, divided by the standard error. And now I have a t value, 2.15. Now my last step is I need to know what the critical t value is. Okay, the point at which I'm going to fail to reject or reject my null hypothesis. And so I'm going to look down here. Our degrees of freedom was 9. I have this table here. At 9 degrees of freedom, our critical value is 2.262. 2.262. And so if my value is above that, then I will reject my null hypothesis and assume that there is a significant difference between the two measures. But it is below that. Okay, so I'm going to fail to reject my null hypothesis and say that there was no statistical difference between my two measures. Okay? All right, well, what if I realized I made a mistake, and this shouldn't be 63. This was actually supposed to be 93. I can go in and change that, and now it changes everything except, see, this difference is now 20.6, the average difference here. So I need to actually change that in this part here because I used the constant value there and didn't have a reference. 20.6, and then I can copy and paste that to the rest. And now everything else automatically shifts. And see, that actually made a big difference because of the error there. I didn't have a significant difference, but now my t-value is 2.96, and that is greater than our critical t-value, so I would reject the null hypothesis then. Okay, so that's how you do a paired samples t-test, calculating using the functions of Excel.